And that's the end of the first half. As the teams head to the locker room, the Spartans lead the Bulldogs by a score.
You guys stink.
Geez, Coach, we're only down a couple of points.
No, I mean you guys really smell. You need to hit the showers. And here, I got every one of you new bars of soap from the Sterling Soap Company. Each bar is artisan crafted using natural ingredients and essential oils. They also have shave soaps, colognes, beard balm, and a whole lot more. Now get in there.
But Coach, we have another half to play.
I don't care. I can't stand to be around you.
A few minutes later.
All right, bring it in tight. You guys are still playing terrible, but you're smelling great out there. Now listen, you're going to need to stock up for the rest of the season. We got a lot of tough games left. So go to sterlingsoap.com after the game. That's STIRLING soap.com. You got that?
Yes, Coach.
Great. Sterlingsoap.com on 3. 1, 2, 3. Sterlingsoap.com.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Hello, sports fans, and welcome to another edition of Yesterday's Sports on the Sports History Network. Today, we'll have a guest. His name is Harv Aronson, and he has his own website. And he grew up in Pittsburgh. He's a big Pittsburgh Pirates fan, a big Pittsburgh Steelers fan. So welcome to the show, Harv.
Mark, thank you, and appreciate you having me on. And this should be a real fun discussion we're going to have today.
I'm sure it will. So first tell us a little about your website and how you got started on all of this.
Well, actually, it's a portfolio page. It's under something called clippings.me, and it's just a collection of all the articles I write. And then I'm starting to add all our my podcast episodes on there as well, so people can just click on any one of those pictures they see on there in my portfolio and either take them to the article or to the podcast. I did used to have a website for Total Sports Recall, the name of my show. But I decided a portfolio was the better way to go because it's easier to access all my work. I did have a website a long time ago, Steelers Hotline, which was specifically only about the Steelers, obviously. So I've had some experience with websites before, but that's where all my work is right now on that clippings.me/Total Sports Recall.
Okay, so any fans interested in reading Harv's articles, you can find it at that portfolio. So I think we're not too far away in age. I'm about to turn 64, and how old are you?
Mm-hmm. I will be 67 in May, so we're very close in age.
So about 3 years apart, and both grew up in the 1970s, so I guess we could start with that. You wrote an article, which I read, about what it was like to grow up in the 1970s, and I, a few years ago, was inspired to write a book about growing up in the 1970s. So I don't know where to start, but what do you remember? We could go through a few things. What do you remember most about growing up in the 70s?
Sure. Well, I always like to brag, about the 70s because, as you well know, Mark, I always consider the 70s as the best era to ever grow up in as a child. It just was a very special decade, and it's so much different than what teenagers and young people are going through with their lifestyles today. I mean, it's a night and day difference. And I know you and I had talked about the fact that we could go outdoors when we were, and I would have been 1971, which we'll get to later, but that's when I started watching sports and I was 12. So from like 12 to 16, we were able to go out. We had no cell phones, no computers. We could go outdoors. Our parents would let us just go out the door, come home when you want. And it was just amazing. We'd just travel around, do whatever we wanted. They had no way to get in touch with us. It was a completely different lifestyle, but it was really a lot of fun.
It sure was. I just, if I had to pick out one thing that was great about growing up in the 1970s, just along the same lines that the freedom that we had as children, and then even into the young teenage years. There was it was unbelievable. I mean, our parents really didn't really even want us at home. They told us, get out, go,
Yeah,
get out of
yeah.
our hair,
And
and
exactly.
yeah, go ahead. Yep.
It's
Actually,
unfortunate. I was going to say, unfortunate these days that people that were our age now, that are our age now, that while we were that age back then, it's a scary world now. And,
yeah,
children can't just roam around. You just can't trust that. It's just a lot of dangers out
no,
there. So we didn't have that worry. It was just go as you please. And we didn't have to look over our shoulder. And we were out and playing games and sports and doing whatever.
absolutely. And I was going to say, besides the fact that they didn't really want us at home, I knew that if I stayed home, my parents were going to find work for me. There was not going to be a leisurely day. They're going to say, "Oh, you don't want to go out? Then here's a list of jobs for you to do."
Yeah, well, I grew up in a cul-de-sac in Pittsburgh, and fortunate for me was that all my neighbors on that street, and there was probably about 18 houses, they were all athletic. Everybody wanted to be outdoors, so we had a great neighborhood where we were always out in the street, either playing a game called Indian ball. I don't know if you remember that, but that was the most popular game. Playing Indian ball and kickball, and then just riding our bikes, and skateboarding was a big thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, we were always constantly outdoors every day.
Absolutely. Same with my neighborhood. There was a lot of children in my neighborhood, and everybody wanted to play sports. And you mentioned bikes. Everybody had a bike, and if you wanted to get a game started, you just drove around the neighborhood, knocking on people's doors, and you could always tell where there was a lot of kids congregated, because if there was a pile of bikes out in the front, you knew that's where all the kids are.
Well, our cul-de-sac was a pretty steep hill, and if anybody's familiar with Pittsburgh, it's a very hilly town. There's a lot of hills, and our street was one of them. And in our backyard, we actually had, in the winter didn't stop us from getting outside. We had the best sled riding hill in the neighborhood, and we drew kids from all different neighborhoods because they wanted to be in our backyards because it had the best hill to go down sled riding. But go-karts were big. And fortunate for me, too, was my elementary school was just a couple hundred yards from my house down the street. So I used to be able to walk to school, and they had a great baseball field there. And then behind the houses at the bottom of my street, there was another open field we used for baseball. So it was always something to do.
That's right. Yep, we did it all. And you can make some money, too. We'd go around knocking on people's doors, asking if they wanted their sidewalk shoveled. Yeah.
And it's interesting because one of my colleagues I work with is from Pittsburgh, working from home there, and they're having terrible winter weather right now. And I told him the other day, I said, I don't ever remember it being that cold. They're talking about minus 14 degrees up there right now.
Yeah, that's where.
And all the winters I grew up in, I never remember it being that cold. I don't know about Texas. I know Texas gets cold weather too.
Yeah, that's where I live. That's what we're having now. Minus. It's been below zero for quite a few nights.
Oh my gosh.
Yep, I'm up in.
Well, here in Florida. I was going to say, here in Florida, in Jacksonville, supposedly tonight's temperatures are going to be the coldest in 25 years.
Wow.
So we're getting a little taste of winter as well.
Yeah, it's cold everywhere. Oh, yeah.
Uh-huh. Yep.
Yep. So you were asking me when we were emailing each other about how I became a sports fan, and I think it was mostly because of my father was a big sports fan, and he was a big Yankees fan. So, of course, he was always telling me and my brother about all the players that he watched when he was a kid. You know, Joe DiMaggio and Mickey Mantle and all those guys. And then he was a Giants fan in football. So he was always talking about Sam Huff.
Oh, my gosh. Great player.
Yeah. He would always compare everyone. You know, I mention a player to him like, oh, that Willie Lanier's a really good middle linebacker. My father would say, yeah, he's good, but he's no Sam Huff.
Yeah. You know, and I'm a history buff. I love history, sports history. So I know all about way before I was born, but I know all about Sam Huff. And I mean, we can get into it later, but the sports today not the same as it was when we were growing up, and even beyond that before us.
No.
Much different style of play. It's really a big difference.
Huge difference. And then my brother's about 3.5 years older than me, so you know he became a sports fan, and then everyone in my neighborhood. So like you know, pretty similar to you. Everyone in the neighborhood was playing sports. But what as far as becoming a fan of a spectator of watching sports, was that how did that come about?
Yeah, so I was really never that athletic, and I went to a high school that was more of a jock school. We had really good football teams, baseball teams, so I really was not good enough to compete except around the neighborhood. But as far as becoming a fan, I always attribute that to 1971 when I was 12, and I've said before, I can remember like yesterday, I can still see it in my head going up to my father's bedroom where he was watching television, and he was watching the 1971 World Series. And the first image I had was Roberto Clemente at the plate.
Yep.
And the first swing I see him take is a home run.
Yep.
I instantly became a Roberto Clemente fan. He became my boyhood hero. And then I was just attracted to sports from that point forward. And the funny story about that is my neighbor came down and asked if I wanted to go downtown to watch the World Series celebration because the Pirates ended up winning that 7th game and the World Series. And so it was a lot of fun being downtown. The city's going crazy and you know all of that excitement. I was like, wow, sports is great. Yeah. And then, of course, a year later was the Immaculate Reception. So, you know, a year later I became a Steelers fan and 13 years old and been a diehard ever since. I still remember listening to that game on the radio because in Pittsburgh and back then in the NFL, they had a blackout rule.
Yep. In
your own city, if your game did not sell out, it was not allowed to be broadcast on television. So I ended up listening to it on the radio. So I never got to see the play until I saw replays. But an amazing moment. And from that point forward, just became a diehard sports fan.
That is unbelievable. I would imagine that younger sports fans can't even fathom that idea of not being able to watch the game, the team that played in your own city. I guess I never. Yep. I had wished that I could get the blackout rule because I always saw the Giants and Jets. And neither one of them had very good teams at the time I was watching. Well, the Jets still don't have a good team. They never do. But oh
my gosh,
I was
team's a mess.
They never had a blackout because the games were always sold. You know, the games were always sold out. So
yeah.
But
well, it so happens my father was at that game. The Immaculate Reception game. And at the point right before the famous play, everybody in the stadium thought the game was over.
Yep.
You know, with a minute left, they thought there's no way the Steelers are going to get downfield and win this game. But when Franco picked up the ball, my father said that he was a fan in front of him was eating food or whatever and got so excited he threw it up in the air and it went everywhere on his lap.
Yeah.
And in fact, a bit of trivia about that play is that Art Rooney Sr. at the time, of course he was the owner, had made his way to the locker room
right.
because he thought the game was over.
Yep.
And he was going to the locker room to congratulate his players. He never got to see the play. So pretty interesting.
That's right. I remember hearing that story. Yep, and that you mentioned.
And it's funny because there was one note I had written, Mark, about when we were talking about before growing up in the 70s. Here's something these young people don't realize. When we were growing up in the 70s, and they've got all this television now and streaming and 6 million stations you can watch. Back then, we had 4 stations on television.
That's right.
That's all you could see.
Yeah.
And it was CBS, NBC, CBS, CBS, NBC, and CBS, and then the public radio, or public television. But at midnight, and I'm sure in Texas you may have seen the same thing. At midnight, the televisions went off. You couldn't watch anything.
That's right.
They put a symbol up on the television, and there was no more broadcasts after midnight. So that's something that we experienced that they probably wouldn't understand.
That's right. I remember that. Usually around midnight, that was it. There would be some kind of a sound bar, and that was it.
Yep.
Oh, you're good.
Yeah, we had that. Yeah, I was gonna say we had the little Indian logo. I don't know if you had that on your televisions. It would come up, and that was it.
Yeah, yeah, that was a lot different. I think you have the impression. I think you have the impression that because I'm a Cowboys fan, I'm from Texas, but I am not from Texas. I grew up in Jersey.
I think you mentioned that to an email.
Yeah, I became a Cowboys fan mainly because of my brother. He became a Cowboys fan during the famous Ice Bowl game against the Packers.
Yeah.
Yep. So you mentioned that 1971 World Series, Pirates and Orioles, and I remember watching that as a kid, and I think still to this day that's one of the best World Series I've ever seen. That was an extremely competitive World Series. So many great players.
And there's some interesting, and 2 interesting things about that series. First of all, a year later, tragically, Roberto Clemente dies in a plane crash on New Year's Eve, 72. And then Steve Blass, who was the star pitcher of the series for the Pirates, would just totally lose all his abilities in like 1973. All of a sudden, he just couldn't pitch, and they couldn't figure it out. One of the best pitchers in baseball became one of the worst, and he had to retire. He couldn't figure out what was wrong. He just had no control anymore. It was really, really bizarre.
And they never figured out why?
No.
Wow.
He tried everything, and he just was walking everybody. He was throwing wild pitches.
Strange.
Giving up lots of hits, and very, very strange. So he just retired because he just didn't have it anymore. It's really, really bizarre.
Right. And the other thing I remember about those early World Series is that they did a lot of times they were playing in the daytime. They didn't even have night games.
That's right. And then there was the doubleheaders, twilight doubleheaders. I used to go to Three River Stadium in Pittsburgh. I've been to many doubleheaders. They were a blast. They were a lot of fun. But they don't do that much anymore either. I even think back in the day they had triple headers where they played 3 games in one day. But doubleheaders were very common in the 70s.
That's right.
They were all the time.
And I'm sure you recall the transistor radio, listening to the games on the transistor.
Of course. Of course. I'm telling you. I used to listen to radio a lot because we didn't have the television coverage they had back then.
That's right.
And there was a game in 1979, I want to say, I think it was, with the Pirates and the Cubs. And the Pirates won the game 22-0.
Wow.
And I remember it clearly because Dave Parker had 5 RBIs that day. And Rennie Stennett, our second baseman, set a record. He went 7 for 7 in that game, in a 9-inning game. And it's only been done once before, and I think it was like 1898 or something that happened. But he was only the second player in the history of baseball to go 7 for 7.
Wow. Unbelievable. And
listen to it on the radio. Yeah.
And that's not really a well-known name. You wouldn't expect it from a...
Rennie Stennett?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You would expect maybe.
Yeah, but he was a very good second baseman.
Right. Yep, I remember listening to, and then sometimes you'd try to listen to the transistor radio while you were in school, and depending on what teacher you had, if the teacher was,
Yeah, exactly.
some of the teachers were sports fans, and they would ask you, "What's the score? What's going on in the game?" Some of them would, some of them would take it away. You can't listen to that, and then,
Right.
you know, well, a lot of those baseball games were day games, not at night like today. They're all at nighttime. But I wanted.
And you talked about how your father was a sports fan. Same thing for me. My father was a very big sports fan, avid golfer, good bowler. But I remember him telling me that he had actually seen Babe Ruth's last game in Pittsburgh.
Wow.
So he got to see Babe Ruth play in person, which is something else. And my very first baseball game, which is interesting because I didn't become a fan until I was 12, but at 9 years old, I was roughly around 9 years old, he had taken me to a game at Forbes Field,
Right.
the old Pirates Stadium. And I remember that because there was a foul ball that came up. It's weirdness. You can remember certain things. Foul ball came up and rolled right in front of our feet, and we just kind of watched it roll by. We didn't bother to pick it up. To this day, I don't know why we didn't pick it up, but just watched it roll across our feet.
Well,
But yeah, my
go ahead.
grandmother in Pittsburgh, she had lived in this building that overlooked Forbes Field. And I remember we used to be able to go to her roof, and from her roof, it was higher than the stadium. You could see part of the outfield, and you could basically watch some of the game from her roof. It was pretty cool.
Wow, that's neat. Yeah, that's really neat. And you mentioned, I was just, you mentioned the ball just rolling past your feet. Now there's a prime example of how different it is from today and back then. Today people are beating each other up to get a silly baseball, and back then you didn't even think anything of it. All right, it's a baseball, big deal.
Yeah. And you go to stadiums today, it's much different than we were there. And one reason I say that is because the athletes are also different today in their mentality, their attitudes. We used to go to be able to Three River Stadium, even if you had a seat in the upper deck, they would allow you to walk down all the way down to the field before the game started, whether they were having batting practice, turning around. And the players would come over, shake our hand, greet us, give us baseballs. Can't have that anymore.
No, forget it. Now you go anywhere near the field, they'll slap handcuffs on you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yep.
And then you get idiot fans like the one in Detroit with my team, the Steelers, this year with DK Metcalf, who was mouthing off to him. Metcalf goes over and punches the guy in the face.
Oh.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, my God.
Unreal.
Yeah. Well, speaking of 1970s
Yeah,
1970s football and baseball, I think you wanted to talk a little bit about how different it was at that time. And I mean, there's so many differences.
Yeah. All the new rules they have in place today, these guys that played in our era could not play today. They'd be thrown out of the games. The hitting was harder. A lot of the quarterback hits, they didn't protect the quarterbacks the same way they do today. You could bump receivers to the line and knock them around. I mean, Mel Blount from the Steelers was one of the hardest hitters you'll ever see. He was allowed to have free will on receivers. Can't have that today. But I know we had talked in our emails about you being a Cowboys fan. Obviously, anybody knows the Cowboys and the Steelers knows they had a big rivalry in the Super Bowls back in the 70s, having played twice. And they were both great games. And I think I might have mentioned to you in one of our emails that if it wasn't for the Steelers, the Cowboys would have won all the Super Bowls back then because they were the best team in football aside from not having defeated the Steelers. Great teams.
Unbelievable. I don't know if we'll ever see anything like that again. Two teams that were so evenly matched, and the amount of, I think it still holds the record in Super Bowl 13. There's I think maybe 20, 25 people involved in that game that are now in the Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think the Steelers are up to like 36 players in the Hall of Fame, somewhere around there. And I know the Cowboys probably are not far behind. But, yeah, we had some classic games. And I think I mentioned to somebody recently that huge difference between now and then is back then, the parity in the NFL now is just, it's unbelievable. Anybody, and it's proof this year that, Patriots could come from last place and get up in the Super Bowl. But back then, whenever Oakland was playing, whenever Pittsburgh was playing, whenever Dallas was playing, whenever Miami was playing, you always knew they're probably going to win.
Yeah.
Whoever they're playing, they're probably going to win the game. They were that dominant.
That's right.
You don't have that anymore.
No, not even close. Yeah, you had those four teams. Those four teams dominated. To a lesser extent, the Vikings and the Rams. You knew they were always going to be in the playoffs. They might not win, but they were always going to be there. So those six teams really just dominated the 1970s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
absolutely.
Yeah, as you mentioned.
But our two teams put on some good Super Bowls, I'll tell you. And, it's just those games could have gone either way. Of course, one of my favorite highlights from either one of those two Super Bowls was Jack Lambert and Cliff Harris. And I'm sure you're aware of that.
Yeah.
When Cliff Harris patted Roy Jarrell on the helmet after a missed field goal.
That's
and
right.
Lambert saw it and came running over and slammed him to the ground. That was one of my favorite moments of all time. I mean,
yeah.
And he is one of my favorite players of all time, Jack Lambert. He was just a classic.
Right.
Animal.
Yeah, well.
He was a beast.
I'm not sure. I know it's a great moment for Steelers fans, but I'm not sure that it really had that much of an impact on the game itself, because the Steelers' defense was just so... I mean, they didn't really need any extra motivation, because they were already... That Super Bowl 10, their defense was just overwhelming. I mean, Staubach, every time Staubach went back to pass, he was under heavy pressure. And I think that's one of the main reasons the Cowboys didn't win that game, is because Staubach was on the run the whole game.
Yeah. I mean, that's a defense you probably will never see again. I mean, it just from all 11 positions were strongly manned. I mean, we were strong at every single position. It's just, you don't see that. Every one of those guys could have been in the Pro Bowl.
That's right.
It's just amazing.
And another thing about those two teams is that they both built through the draft, not through trades.
Exactly.
Both teams.
And all the hype these days is about who's in the first round. You have to get a first rounder. If you look back at the Steelers, and I'm sure it's probably the same way with Dallas, that a lot of their players came in like the 6th, 5th, 6th, 7th round. And back then we had like 17 rounds.
Yeah.
Some of those guys were in like 13th, 14th round, but they came out as huge stars.
Yep.
So it had nothing to do with first round.
No.
It had to do with finding talent.
And a lot of them came from small, unknown colleges. But the Cowboys and the Steelers both had tremendous scout. The Cowboys, of course, had Gil Brandt, who was a master at going out and finding unknown talent. And the Steelers had a guy very similar to Gil Brandt, probably not as well known. I believe his name was Bill Nunn. Bill Nunn.
Yep, that's who it is.
Unbelievable.
Fantastic scouter.
Yep.
They know how to find. I mean, John Stallworth, one of the greatest receivers ever, came from Alabama A&M.
Yeah.
Who ever heard of that?
Yeah.
So yeah, they knew how to find talent. Chuck Noll was an expert on that anyway. He knew how to judge talent. And his very first pick was Joe Green.
Yep.
So there you go. And he built the defense around him.
That will conclude part 1 of my discussion with Harv Aronson. We hope that you enjoyed it. Thank you, and God bless.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com. Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website. Seriously, all you gotta do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you gotta do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.